Hello. Hope you can hear me out there. Last time I used my earbuds and they're not here right now. I left them at work. Yay. I realized 10 minutes before it was time to get on here and start the video. Yeah, that's pretty typical for me. But I'm excited. I'm excited to be back to do another live stream. It's been about a month since the last one I did, which was also the very first one that I have ever done. So I was a little bit nervous about how that was going to go. Was anyone going to show up? I think that's kind of what put me off from doing these types of things, is that little kid fear of rejection and no one's going to show up to my birthday party. So please accept my invite. I humbly invite you to join me tonight as we discuss the book which was selected for the book club last month in February, which, holy cow, how is it March already? But regardless of how I feel about that, I know February was a short month, but still. So grab a beverage, get comfortable, and yeah, get ready to perhaps get a little bit spicy and unpredictable, because we are about to kind of perform the Norse pagan equivalent. See if I can angle you down a bit so you're not staring at my ceiling. There we go. Kind of the Norse pagan equivalent, as I see it, of summoning Beetlejuice. We're going to talk about Loki tonight, because the book that we selected, that you all helped me select to read for the book club in February, was a book in the Pagan Portals series called Pagan Portals Loki. And that was by, I believe the name was Dagulf Loftsson, which Loft or Lofter is another byname of Loki. So definitely makes sense that someone with that name or pen name would be the author of such a book. And I'm not going to lie, one of my favorite things about this book was that it was relatively short, at least as far as I'm concerned. It was, only 80 or 90 pages or so, which is kind of nice, because one of the things that I quickly realized when I started doing this book club, as I try to pick the inevitable cat hair off my lipstick, as per usual. But one of the things I kind of noticed early on when starting the book club, hi Merlin. Please don't walk on the keyboard. But one of the things I noticed when starting the book club and going through some of the pagan, witchy related books that I've acquired is that some of them might be a little bit more conducive to reading within the time span of a month than others. Some of the more dense and books that I own, or things on the green witchcraft and plant witches and herbalism and that type of thing that I've collected, I kind of realized are just gonna be really dense and long texts that might take me longer than a month, and all of you guys out there, longer than a month to get through. So I liked that this book was relatively short. I might try to see if there are any other books in this Pagan Portals series on the Norse gods that we can talk about for the book club, since they all seem to be just relatively short and easy text to get into. Hello, hi, someone finally is out there watching me. Hello, I hope you can hear me. There's my cat Merlin in the background. We'll see who else shows up for this video. I said before I went to go start the live stream, we'll see if either my cat Loki shows up or if Loki shows up, because the reason I compare him to Beetlejuice is I feel like he is definitely that God, like almost like Voldemort, where if you say his name 3 times or just too many times, like you will get his attention and he will show up. He will show up. And maybe he'll be in a playful mood, and maybe he'll be like my cat over here, where sometimes like even negative attention is still attention. So we'll see what happens. Either way, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this book. You might see me kind of look at my phone or something down here because I was making little highlights and notes in my little ebook version. I just have the ebook on my phone, which is kind of nice because, I had to do my little scholarly English major nerd thing and do my little highlights and bookmark things that I wanted to go back to and talk about. So what I might do, and the kind of the nice thing about doing the live streams in this book club format is that even if nobody shows up to watch, I can at least just like ramble about the book that I read to everybody and still kind of do the Pagan book reviews and give my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on it. So I guess while we kind of wait and see who else trickles in to join us, I can kind of give you my thoughts on the book and then kind of go over the specific things that I made note of, that I wanted to make particular mention of, and kind of branch off into possible discussion topics from there. So yeah, like I said, I really liked that this book was not only just relatively short, so it was easy to get through. I actually finished it probably about a week or 2 ago, which was nice because then I was just able to not feel pressured to finish it before the beginning of this month. I'm really ADD, but I'm going to do my best to, at least keep this book club going for a solid 12 months. Started in January, going to try to do it for a year and see if I can stay on top of it and stay organized for that long. Because it also just helps me focus. I have a really long reading list and a lot of things that I'm into and want to read about and learn more about, especially as it relates to paganism, witchcraft, Norse paganism, all those fun things. But yeah, my little ADD brain wants to kind of try to tackle too much. I've always had a habit of having eyes bigger than my stomach, both when it comes to food and literature. So I'll be over here trying to read like 5 different books at once and switching back and forth between all of them. And then it takes me like months to finish any of them. And because I'm so distracted and going back and forth, it's kind of a lot harder to really absorb anything doing it that way. So really this book club, if anything, is beneficial to me because it helps me have to focus on like one book at a time and getting through one book on my list at a time before I'm allowed to move on to the next one. So yeah. But let me know if you guys picked this book up, if you were able to read it, if you finished it, if you're still reading it, what you thought about it. I did like that not only does it just kind of give a brief summary of how Loki appears within the Eddas and within the Norse myths in the stories that he appears in, but not only that, instead of just laying all out what we know historically and where Loki is mentioned in the historical texts like Snorri and the poetic and prose Edda, this author also does go a lot into their own personal gnosis. We're talking about the book Pagan Portals Loki. It's apparently part of a really extensive series called the Pagan Portals books. And they're all relatively small and relatively like cheap little books, which so I might do more of them for the book club. But me kind of being a Loki follower and somewhat of a Lokian myself, insert Norman Osborn Spider-Man meme. But yeah, being somewhat of a Loki follower myself and someone with kind of a little soft spot for him, the more I got to learn about him coming into this faith, I was definitely keen to pick up this book, Pagan Portals, Loki, and see what other people who have actually worked with Loki and have had experience with him have to say about it, because he is definitely a very controversial figure, not only within Norse mythology and like historical takes on him, as far as like, you know, the Christianization of him as being this like satanic devil, evil figure. And if you want to view it from that very like black versus white way of thinking about things. But I think even in like modern heathenry, he's a kind of a very divisive topic. And I've had people within the pagan community, not like in a really forceful way, how do I want to put it, like not in a hateful way or an angry way, but just in kind of like a questioning way or an almost baffled way, kind of ask me like, how do you even work with Loki? Why would you want to? Like, yeah, isn't he evil, or isn't he chained forever down at the bowels of hell until Ragnarok? How can you even interact with a god who, by all accounts, his powers, you know, you would think have been bound. He himself has been bound, and he's been cut off, and he's not even a god. He's shunned. He's an outcast. You know, how would you even be able to work with him? And let alone, why would you want to? And for me, I kind of went into it a little bit in my book, not my book, my video on like why I work with Loki, because he kind of for me just came around almost like a package deal when I first wanted to approach Odin and start maybe working with Odin. And I had set up my Odin altar and all that, and I was like all gung ho, ready to meet the All Father, you know, learn from him, tell him what I know, what I've seen, what I know. And then all of a sudden I have this other guy showing up and causing all these shenanigans and pretty much playing pranks on me. And I just kind of started to wonder if maybe with it being kind of this trickster energy, if that was Loki. And so the more I researched about Loki and learned about kind of his relationship with Odin, as far as them being said to be blood brothers or have made some type of pact with each other, where Odin had vowed that he would never drink without Loki also either being present, or that, you know, if Loki were to be present, he would also receive a drink anytime Odin does. And so for me, I had just kind of therefore been more willing to accept Loki as kind of a part of the deal, and had set up my dual drinking horns on my altar, which you may have seen if you've seen my altar videos. But yeah, I have two horns because I wanted to, first and foremost, as someone that wanted to work with Odin, uphold Odin's pact. Because the way I kind of viewed it, and I think the author of this Pagan Portals book goes into it as well, where my view of it is like, gods are all powerful cosmic metaphysical beings. They don't really operate on the same time scales or with the same sense of space and time as we do. So if you're looking at it from like, well, the time is linear and Ragnarok is something that happened aeons ago in the past and it's over and done with, then Loki is either defeated, or if time is linear and Ragnarok is a thing that has yet to happen, then yeah, Loki might still be chained and bound. But my view is like, he's still this really all-powerful being. He's not just this physical being, even if he does have a physical form, which is chained somewhere. In my view, to make another nerd reference, as I want to do, he's very much like Sephiroth in FF7, where you think he's dead and defeated and like sleeping in the North Crater, but he's able to kind of send forth his energy and send forth, like almost astral project, and send forth these seemings of himself, perhaps, out into the world still, and interact with us on Midgard in that way, if you want to view it that way. or as everything is cyclical and has happened, is happening, happened, will happen. It's all happening at once in different points on reality. And so at some point out there, Loki is still free and him and Odin are still bros hanging out and everything's still good. So it just kind of depends on what paradigm you want to operate under. But for me personally, I'm trying to get out of that black versus white, good versus evil paradigm of thinking. As I said in my kind of follow-up video to my Loki video, where I talk about Odin and Loki, me really viewing them as almost two sides of the same coin. They have a lot of kind of similar dualistic aspects of one another, and so in my view, they often work in tandem, or Odin will kind of send Loki out to be his man behind the scenes, you know, when he needs to do some dirty work. So yeah, it was interesting for me to not only get a little overview in this book of where Loki appears in the myth, but also get a take on him from someone that does actually work with him and has like more personal UPG of him, because I have met other Lokians, Loki followers, or just people that are, you know, kind of willing to have a more open mind as far as Loki is concerned. But yeah, it can still kind of be something weird and difficult for even me to accept, because when he first showed up, I was like, what do you want with me, bro? I'm a very anxious person. I'm definitely a creature of habit. I don't like change. And that kind of made the light bulb go off and made me realize, like, maybe that's exactly what he wants with me, because he's kind of the disruptor of order and stagnation, and kind of forces you out of your comfort zone, which with the whole paganism, jumping into witchcraft, jumping into starting a YouTube thing is definitely something that I've just been trying to force myself to do overall, is just get out of my comfort zone. So he's really good for that. And yeah, good for getting out of stagnation, and kind of, even with the gods in the stories, he refuses to let even the gods just sit around and rest on their laurels, you know? If he feels like they're getting too cushy or too full of themselves. Another good point that I think they do make in this book is that, like, Loki oftentimes is not just like a Loki, like liesmith or father of lies, but more often than not, it seems like he actually gets in trouble for telling the truth, telling the harsh truths, telling the hidden truths, telling people secrets, telling people the things that they might not want to hear about themselves, the things that you might kind of be deluding yourselves about. Like, he is not only a master of illusion, but he's also able to see through others' illusions and see through the bullshit, and like, he will call you on it, you know? And we all kind of need that every now and then, you know, like everyone has that one friend who's kind of like not afraid to just tell it to you like it is and give their opinions, whether you want them or not. But at the same time, all of us kind of need that person around sometimes, you know, and can appreciate them for it at the same time. But that's kind of my take on it. So let's see what else I have highlighted here in this book that I wanted to talk about. One of the first things that I made note of is it does mention that he is, you know, not just the son of a Jotun and, you know, supposedly an Aesir. I can never say this word. Aesir, female Aesir goddess, which has often made it uncertain whether he himself should be counted as a Jotun or an As, one of the gods of Aesir. Because yeah, he is often featured in the stories with the Aesir, with Odin, Thor. You know, he hangs out with Thor a lot in the stories. And it also mentioned that he is married in these stories to Sigyn, an Aesir goddess, which this author says is connected to themes of victory, which I thought was interesting to make note of, because I know Sig does mean something like victory. Like Odin is called like Sigfather, Victory Father, or you have the name like Sigdrifa as a Valkyrie name, like the driver to victory. So that I think would be a correct translation of the name, Sigyn, to then denote a goddess perhaps associated with victory. But I had never really made that connection before or heard that anywhere else before. And Sigyn, aside from in the story being Loki's wife, mother to his, I guess, like legitimate children in wedlock, who are then killed as retribution for his part in the slaying of Balder. But yeah, other than it mentioning that, when he's tied up, she's the loyal wife who holds the bowl over him to catch the snake venom and keep it from dripping on him. But other than that, she's not really mentioned anywhere that I have been able to find. We don't really know a lot about her or what she does as a goddess, what other attributes she might have, what other functions she might have. Or what she might be connected with. But yeah, the name Sigyn would perhaps denote a victory goddess. So perhaps Odin married him off to one of his Valkyries as like a reward or something. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm curious to look more into, is this mention of her being a victory goddess. And Loki, well, he is kind of a disruptor and causes disorder and pulls a lot of pranks on the gods. He does also bring about a lot of gifts that the gods are that then receive as a result of some of the things he does, like Thor's hammer and Odin's spear and the ring Draupnir, just to name a few. So perhaps he's tied to kind of like rewards of victory and positive outcomes that way. Who knows? I'm just making random associations off the top of my head here. But yeah, kind of like I said, he does go into Loki kind of being a very controversial figure within the heathen community. Some people might view him, it says, as just like a kind of a more sinister clown or a prankster, like maybe like a Joker figure, like some men just want to watch the world burn. And yeah, I won't lie. For me personally, well, I do see kind of like, and my introduction to Loki was kind of as that more playful trickster archetype, pulling pranks, dangling the fake spider above the little sister's head to scare her and things like that. And I go to him personally for like a lot of help with inner child work. And healing the inner child, letting the inner child out and letting it out to play and kind of run free and lower those inhibitions that might keep us back from exploring new things or just letting ourselves go, letting ourselves take risks, things like that. Even something as small as like when you're leaving the grocery store and you still get that like childhood urge to just push the cart really fast and like stand on it and like see how fast you can go while you ride on it. Like, I don't care how old you are. I feel like Loki's the one that will just kind of encourage you to do those impulsive things, which, as we know from the stories, can sometimes be a good thing. And you all need to just kind of have some harmless fun every now and then and let go. But he also can very much like be the one to egg you on and like let you lean into those bad impulses. Like, I can be a very impulsive person sometimes. And hi, Lena. But yeah, he can, well, it's kind of good to indulge that playfulness and that playful side at times. There are definitely times when I need to learn to say no to that side of myself and no to like the little Loki devil on my shoulder, kind of also being like, yeah, do it, just do the thing. Come on, it'll be fine. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, no, there are consequences sometimes, man. You're like, come on, you should know. So yeah, he will very much try to kind of like poke you and like urge you into those impulses, both good and bad at times. But, let's be real. I think there is also that angry, bitter, resentful side to him because of some of the things that he has endured at the hands of the Aesir, regardless of his own actions or his own misdeeds. I'm not gonna, I won't kid with you guys. One of the first things I did when I came to Norse paganism was pick up the Neil Gaiman audiobook of his telling of the Norse myths, because the man's a good storyteller. You got to hand it to him. And especially with him being the one to narrate the audiobook, he does a really good job, I think, with just kind of threading the tales together into a cohesive narrative and adding that oral storytelling aspect to it, because these stories were meant to be read aloud. But when I got to the part with the Binding of Loki, where I get, the whole an eye for an eye justice thing that Odin sometimes has to enact, and that, Loki may have had a hand in Baldur's death. But when I got to the scene in that audiobook where it talked about one of Loki's sons being tied up and then him being forced to watch while his other son is turned into a wolf and eats his second son alive, that was harsh. That brought me to tears. That was pretty traumatic just to listen about, let alone to imagine someone having to actually watch. I don't care if you think it was justified or if he deserved it or not. That was pretty savage, y'all. Odin, he is definitely the guy who I think the ends justify the means in some cases. He thinks, because of Ragnarok and the things he has to do to ensure victory and that, the world's going to survive, he's kind of has to make those judgment calls sometimes. I get it. But yeah, he sometimes can be pretty brutal and, how I'm trying to think of some other adjectives here, but I'm spacing. But yeah, he can be pretty brutal when needs be, and when he thinks that the end is justified of the means. But yeah, that was pretty hard to listen to. So I think that there is definitely that bitterness in Loki, along with the playfulness. It's not all fun pranks and joking. But it does mention that there are others, I think like myself, who have that black sheep aspect to them, black sheep of the family vibe, and who are also drawn to Loki as kind of a god of nonconformity, a god of outcasts, a god of outsiders, and a god of living by your wits, to thine own self be true. I know a lot of people who are gender fluid, transgender, and just fall somewhere on the spectrum of LGBTQ are also drawn to Loki because of his own gender fluidity. Yeah, I think there are definitely, you make a really good point, Lindsay. There are a lot of people who do see Loki as a parent, not only as a father figure, because I think he does really look out for his other children, who deserve honorable mention: Jormungandr, the World Serpent, the Midgard Serpent, and then we have, of course, Fenrir, and then Hel, the goddess Hel, the goddess of the underworld. But yeah, I think he's not only often associated with them as some powerful beings that people interact with, and someone who kind of, I think, looked out for them and tried to do what he could for them, but also I think there are people that also look at him as a mother figure, because he is someone who has experienced both. And I think that also points to not only his impulsivity, but him as just a god of also almost like Odin is, of wanting to learn, and curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back, and just kind of being you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna try this because I want to see what happens. I'm just gonna turn into a horse and give birth to another horse because I want to see what happens. I just want to experience everything life has to offer. You know, it is said that if you're willing to hold to the belief that Loki is one of the three gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, that created mankind, then he is the one that gave us our mortal forms, our physical forms, and our ability to kind of experience all of the five senses. Yeah, I think he can definitely kind of have those parental figure aspects to him. My joke is that if Odin is the Allfather, then that makes Loki's everyone, and that if Loki's his blood brother, then that makes Loki's everyone's crazy uncle. Yeah, because I think especially if you're someone that also works with hell like I have, he can have that parental figure to him, but I don't know if he's the most like responsible parental figure ever. You know, I feel like especially with hell in him, I get the vibe of like she was the parentified one, like she's the parent in the relationship and the more responsible one out of the two of them, and that she kind of has, and this is just my take, this is my own UPG, has a conflicted relationship with him as a result, because like he's kind of always just off doing whatever, off, you know, getting impregnated by horses, or off with Thor, or off getting into mischief or what have you, hiding as a salmon one day and tied up with the next, you know. So I feel like she's kind of like the one just back there, like kind of having to be like, really, Dad, really, like I have to be the responsible one here because you can't at times, you know. But yeah, in his own way, he is very caring and he does want to be there for us. And as maybe a fire deity, as this book kind of goes into, has a warmth to him. So, but yeah, he's also just maybe not always the most attentive parent, the most present, you know. But I don't know. As far as my experiences, he's come around for me way more often than Odin has. So who knows? But we won't get into that. So let's see. Yeah, it kind of goes into what I was talking about. As far as his fluidity, being a master shapeshifter, god of illusions, and also the teller of unpleasant truths at times. And this is an interesting note. The fire born from lightning that changes everything it touches. And this ties back to my own personal theory. I think I got into this with someone in the Discord the other day of like, why is Loki said to be a fire god and associated with fire? If you're willing to believe that Loki is, I believe it's Ve is the one out of Odin, Vili, and Ve that he's associated with, and Ve is like the holy space itself, the creating of a holy space, which, you know, can sometimes be denoted by the sacred fire, which would, you know, maybe make Loki the purifying sacred fire. And not only that, but if to go back to his parentage, with his dad being a Jotun named Farbati, which I touched on in my Loki video, means something like fierce striker, and then his mom is Laufey, which means something like leafy, and then it mentions, I think in Gylfaginning in the Prose Edda, means she was also called Needle. And that makes me think of like trees, pine trees, leafy trees. So in my mind, that made me make the association of, okay, Farbati, fierce striker, mother, tree, something striking a tree, lightning striking a tree, and then the tree erupts in flames. If you were like a prehistoric human living out in nature and you saw lightning come down and strike a tree and create fire out of nowhere, that's kind of like some crazy divine shit, you know? Like a fire of divine origin, if you think about it, because it wasn't made by human hands. It literally came from the heavens. And I've also seen that an association where like if Thor is the thunderer and he might just be like the thunder itself, then maybe the reason why you often see Loki accompanying him in the stories is that Loki is the lightning. So thunder and lightning, that explains why they're all like buddies traveling together all the time. Like, I think that's cute. And also a really good explanation for perhaps Loki's origins, why he might be tied to fire. And then, yeah, him also just being this fireborn from lightning that changes everything it touches. Because I think being a god of destruction and chaos, that is definitely an aspect of fire. It can be this really life-preserving and life-sustaining element. It provides light, warmth, heat, helps us cook our food and everything. But yeah, much like Thor kind of being in the rune thirst, standing for this chaotic, uncontrollable force, if you're not careful with it, if you're not careful how you handle it, the fire can get out of control, and like lightning can cause a wildfire and consume everything in its path. So I can definitely tie that imagery to Loki as a god of destruction, consuming everything in its path, and then leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. But it also speaks to him as a god of the old making way for the new. And sometimes you have to burn it all down to make way for something new and that new growth. So while he might be a god of chaos and destruction, I think a lot of people in actual experiences with him have found that even when he is kind of like pulling pranks or causing chaos or being disruptive, it often is for a reason. And like that sounds terrible. It's, you know, when you're really going through it and like in the thick of it and like having one of those like it never rains but it pours kind of days where like everything is going wrong, to be like, everything happens for a reason. And you know, like it sucks when you're going through it. But when you come out the other side, usually you might find that it leads to something better. Something better comes along to replace it. So I found that in my own experiences with Loki, he can be that god that like he will just walk in, flip your table over, and then be like, "You're welcome," and leave. So vary that. Yeah, the next thing I had highlighted here is that to those that choose, or more correctly, are chosen, which is very accurate, to work with him, he is an uncompromising mirror that causes us to confront our true natures with the understanding that self-knowledge is the source of all true power. And I think that is definitely not only very powerful, but very accurate of Loki. I have like some Lokianisms that I have been writing down of just like things that really stand out to me as things Loki has taught me. And the first one is like, know thyself. And then the second one is, to thine own self be true. Like when you find that most authentic, best version of yourself, you have to be true to that self and make decisions that are in accordance with what you think is best for you and in accordance with your own morality, which sometimes, like Loki, might mean going against, you know, convention, going against the norm, going against conventional thoughts of morality, you know, being that black sheep. Ugh, I have cat hairs tickling my nose. It's driving me nuts. But yeah, he definitely can not only hold that mirror up to ourselves and force us to confront ourselves, even those parts of ourselves. Like I said, you can get really good at lying. You can get really good at lying to other people. You might even get pretty good at lying even to yourself. But he'll be the one to like come in and like shatter those delusions and illusions that you've been holding up even about yourself and the things that you haven't been willing to confront. I'm gonna go blow my nose. Ugh. Ugh. The only downside to wearing makeup and having 4 cats is like you can feel when a cat hair is like stuck on your foundation. I don't know, it's tickling me and it drives me nuts. But yeah, it also says that he helps us transform our folly into wisdom. So even if you make mistakes or you mess up or you make poor choices, I've often found that the thing that really drew me to the Norse gods in particular, and why I like working with them is that, like, even with like Odin and Loki, like sometimes might take you to the school of hard knocks and knock you down and put you through these seeming hardships and trials. They will also be the first ones to then reach out that helping hand and pick you back up and dust you off and be like, all right, like, what did you learn from this, you know? And I can kind of appreciate that about them. Yeah, it says he is a compass that always points inward toward the light of personal sovereignty. And I'm a big believer in that. I think a while back, I've never played D&D, but I took one of those D&D alignment quizzes, and I came out chaotic neutral. And I think that is definitely where Loki would follow as well, is chaotic neutral, because he's not really evil per se or like malicious all of the time. Later on, you know, with things like Baldur, or by the time we get to Ragnarok, we definitely see more of that like bitter, vengeful side of Loki, but but yeah, for the most part, I think he's definitely that chaotic neutral god who just kind of more has his own sense of morality. So, one thing that I did want to make note of here, because I did highlight that thing that I said and make a note of it, where it says that Loki is the uncompromising mirror that causes us to confront our true natures. Along with that, and him being a god of transformation and shapeshifting, it made me think of the South American god Tezcatlipoca. I know I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but I believe it can translate into something like the smoky mirror or the fiery mirror. And Tezcatlipoca in the myths is kind of the counterpart and somewhat like adversary to Quetzalcoatl. So I thought that was interesting that we have like this god of knowledge, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, like very Odin vibes, and then his counterpart or like dualistic aspect is the fiery mirror. And like he is also kind of this trickster god from what I remember of the stories. So I thought that's kind of just an interesting correlation there, an interesting parallel. So yeah, I got Loki being a trickster god of illusions and shape shifting, and yeah, Tezcatlipoca, perhaps alluding to similar traits and abilities. Just pointing that out. What else? What else do I have here? The other thing that I did like and that I made a note of is that the author states at the beginning is by the end of this book, you will have everything you need to have a functional devotional practice with Loki. And that's the other thing I really liked about it, is that not only, like I said, does it touch on the mythological aspects of Loki and examining those deeper, and as far as like the author's own theories and UPGs as to exploring the myths to glean deeper aspects of Loki, but they also do provide like some really quick, easy, and easily adaptable just like devotional practice rituals, like how to some sample words for like making an oath to Loki, making an offering to Loki, things you can offer, and things like that. So different rituals you could do as like daily devotionals. So yeah, I like that it was a book for like people who, like me, are not just wanting to get into the historical research of things, but also want to work with Loki and how to go about doing that. So I liked that. He does make a good note early on that because, as I've often pointed out, the Norse sagas were not written down until much later by Snorri, who was a Christian monk, writing not only way after just the Viking Age, but way after, the dawn of these stories themselves in their creation as oral history. And so he does say that we do have to be aware of the fact that it's really uncertain, if we're just going off of the Eddas, how much of especially Loki's character, and I think not only Loki, but like everyone's character, and I'm going to do a whole video on this because we need to talk about Snorri, but and his version of all of the gods, and why I think he picked the stories that he did to include in the Eddas. But yeah, that's a topic for another day. But yeah, we can't really be sure how much of the depiction of Loki that we see in Snorri's version was influenced by the introduction of a worldview with a dualistic version of morality, which was Christianity, which does kind of view things under this black, white, good, evil lens, and is a large part of why Loki is now kind of thought of as this evil Satan figure when he's really not. But yeah, we do have kind of that Christianized lens of him to, I think, thank for that. So I think that's definitely something important to be aware of, especially when you are just getting into the faith of Norse paganism and heathenry, and you're going off of the sagas and Snorri as kind of your basis of research and of your own personal practice and your own personal view of these gods. You have to, I think, just keep in mind that, to history is written by the victors, and the victors were Christians in this case, and they're going to portray these heathen gods the way they want and with their own moral lens. So if you're coming into it and then going away with this view of like, oh, Loki's evil, Loki's Satan, yada yada, you have to keep in mind what source we're getting this information from. So just throwing that out there, just saying it. He does, I think, then in chapter 1, Lopter, the fire from heaven, go on a lot of what I was touching on, and I was really glad to see someone echo my own personal theories as far as Loki's mother perhaps alluding to a tree, and then him being the fire from heaven in terms of lightning, and then some other possible origins and etymologies for Loki's name. And then after that, let me go to my notes page here. It does note that Lopter, which is another name of Loki, and it says it has been translated as lofty one, or one who is aloft, and goes on to say that there are stories where Loki borrows the falcon cloak of either Freya or Frigg in order to go on a mission, and so maybe it's allusion to that, and just, his flying abilities. And then this does note, I need to go do some research on this, because Snorri tells us that Loki was also the possessor of a pair of shoes, which allowed him to walk through the air and over water, much like the Greek Hermes. And I had never come across that before, so I didn't know that. And, we hear things in like fairy tales and stories like that of like the 1,000-mile boots, where you take one step and you can like go 1,000 miles in a single step. So I thought that was interesting that it says Loki is in possession of a pair of such shoes. And then it does also note that another possible interpretation for Lopter is from Lopt Older, which translates to skyfire or lightning in Old Norse. So, and then, I think this is where I got the theory that Loki is the lightning that travels through the sky with his frequent traveling companion, Thor. And I thought that, as he notes, is a really compelling interpretation. And we often see them together, traveling together in a lot of the early stories. So that would be a good explanation for why they hang out together, not only as, Thor, Odin's son, and so therefore, like, Loki is kind of his crazy uncle, but if they're thunder and lightning, then they are frequent traveling companions. You can't have one without the other. Let's see. It also does say he has a great deal in common with another Indo-European Enlightenment bringer, Prometheus, who steals fire from the gods for humanity. Loki often kind of goes against the will of the other gods and goes against their back and does things that they don't agree with, but often they receive really good things or gifts and are better off from it afterwards as a result. And then it talks about how to create your own Loki candle. One thing that I did like about this is, like, I'm definitely like ADD chaos kid. And one of the things that kind of steered me away from Wicca, as I've talked about, is that, like, I often just don't have the mental wherewithal, and let alone the time, money, and equipment to, like, get together a whole altar and, like, cast a circle. And set up all these things before I do. But, you know, especially if you're going to work with Loki and like bring in that chaotic energy, maybe from some of my own personal experiences, I have learned it might be good in some circumstances to cast a circle or just kind of set up some boundaries beforehand to keep him from going a little crazy and getting rambunctious. And so a good idea that I had is if you're creating a Loki candle and you're tying Loki to the god Ve as the creator of a sacred space and like establishing the boundaries thereof, one thing that I might do is make a Loki candle to be something that I can take with me to gatherings and performing rituals, and have the Loki candle be what you carry around the ritual space to set that boundary and set that circle and delineate that like holy space of ritual, and kind of like, you know, fight fire with fire maybe by like containing the chaos with the chaos god, you know. It could work. I did make note here, and I did want to like caution people if you're going into this book that the author does recommend the use of blood or blood magic as far as like blooding runes or using it as bind magic. Hey Rachel, I'm talking about Pagan Portals Loki is the book club book of the month. Which was a really cool book. I definitely recommend it, whether or not you work with Loki, just because it gives some good insights into some of the myths and things like that. And I am always down for like some comparative mythology and some etymology. I'm embarrassed to admit to you guys how much of my time is spent just going down rabbit holes on like Wikipedia and different sources just to trace etymologies of names, like etymologies of names of gods and things like that. I find it fascinating. Maybe it's the English major in me, who knows? But yeah, I think that there's just a lot that can be gleaned from that type of research. So they do a lot of that in here. They give some sample rituals, but I did want to just let you guys know, and as the book does also caution, that they do recommend using blood for some rituals. As always, take from these things what you will. Don't ever do anything that you're uncomfortable with, especially where like oaths and especially blood oaths are concerned. Like, and even more than that, blood oaths to Loki are concerned. Like, even I will be the first one to be like, danger, danger, Will Robinson. Maybe think once, twice, three times before you just go doing that, because like oaths, especially oaths as far as the Norse gods are concerned, are serious fucking business. And if you're gonna be binding yourself to one of those gods, and especially like working with Loki, because yeah, he is a chaos god. He can be unpredictable. You are inviting that into your life if you want to work with him. So just be careful. Be careful if that's something you're gonna do. But yeah, the next chapter does go into Loki as Ve, or the Holy Enclosure, which I think does make a good case for then using the Loki candle to create that sacred space, as I was just talking about. Man, how have I been on here for like almost an hour already? I want to keep this to like maybe an hour, but if people want to stick around and really hear me talk about Loki for longer, I totally will. I have no life. I got nowhere to be. But I think where he starts talking about like Loki as Ve, or the holy enclosure, or especially what I said with like Loki as the sacred fire. Where does it say that? Well, maybe that comes later, but where was I in my notes? So yeah, it talks about Loki as the idea of the god Ve, the holy enclosure. And then, yeah, I think this is where I got the idea of using the candle, was because it said Ve is from the Germanic word Wehas, sacred or holy. And then there's a surviving hint of how holy spaces such as these might have been consecrated and set apart in the Landnama book, which says a 3-cornered plot of land lay unappropriated to the east of the fleet between Cross River and Yaldestone. This plot of land Jorund went round by fire and set it aside for a temple. So maybe this practice of walking around a piece of land with fire could, yeah, be something to incorporate into ritual, as like delineating the ritual space. I think that's something I'm definitely going to take away and incorporate into my practice, just at least specifically as far as like if I want to do any specific Loki rituals are concerned. But let's see. I thought this was cute. It says, according to someone named Axel Ulrich, dandelions were called Lacularin, Loki blooms. So, I mean, I love poofy dandelions, and that just makes me love them even more now, to think that they can be associated with Loki. It gives you some more like Loki associations as far as Loki herbs, things you can do to make your Loki candle and then use it to do a Loki ritual. It talks about him in that Ve or life giver aspect, because in that story, like I touched on earlier, Odin gave On the breath of life, Honir gave Od consciousness and will, and finally Loder or Ve gave them La and Litu the blood and the color of life. So he gave us our physical forms. With which we can, yeah, have in the 5 senses and enjoy all of the good things and indulge in all of the best that Midgard has to offer. So all of those things, I think, which the Christianities would like maybe classify as like sins of the flesh, are like the things that Loki and like Freya too are like down to get rid of. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Rachel, we are planning actually a little ritual for Loki and Angerboda and the children of Loki and Angerboda. So there will be Loki nanigans going down at the Wisconsin gathering for show. It will be my second time participating in and helping to do a Loki ritual. The first one I did at the NC Midsummer Gathering myself, and it was an Odin Loki ritual, my first time leading one, and this time I will be helping another person to lead a ritual. So I'm excited for my second go around, and that's the experience that I was alluding to earlier when I said that, yeah, maybe it might be good for this chaos kid to think about setting down some boundaries and creating like a sacred space and setting some parameters before we do a ritual and just invite people, because like shit got wild and like maybe even wildly out of hand after my first ritual. I'm not gonna lie. So I believe, Lena, that one, Ian might be involved. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it yet. That one will be Will and I doing that one. So that will be fun, because I know Will works with a lot of the more primordial aspects of a lot of the Norse gods. So instead of Loki, like Logi, the fire itself, and things like that. And this book does go into that a lot, which I wanted to talk about. Because, yeah, it talks about Loki as the cunning god, you know, kind of an inventor god, or god of like inspiration and innovation, because like he's the one that goes to the dwarves and causes them to invent all of these wonderful gifts that the gods then receive and use. So let's see, what does this say? And it points out there that in those stories, Loki seems to have a close relationship with those beings known as the Svartalf or Dark Elves. And then that also may imply a connection to fire there. And maybe perhaps a natural ally of blacksmiths, which is another interesting thing that reminds me, because I've often found it interesting how in Norse mythology, we don't really have like a blacksmithing god, because you would think that that would be like a really important craft back in the day. Like the smith is the one that shoes your horses, makes your armor, makes your weapons. And it could be because, like, if you go with the theory that like iron and iron, what is it, iron refining, iron smithing, and just iron weapons as a whole iron age came to the north later than it did other parts of Europe. So maybe they just didn't have blacksmiths around as long in those parts of the world. But I don't know, I just found it odd that there was like no god of blacksmithing in Norse religion. Yeah, the dwarves could be said to be associated with that, but yeah, there was no like god. There's no Oth, god of smithcraft, which I think is interesting. The god, even the gods themselves go to the dwarves to make all of their things for them. All of their best things come from the dwarves. But yeah, so it's interesting that you could almost see like Loki being the one to go and be inspire them to create these works, might tie him to smithcraft as a fire god. But then what it reminded me of was that like maybe Thor could be said to be one as well, because he does have a hammer. I mean, probably not, but you know, he's the one that has a hammer, so maybe blacksmiths called on Thor. I don't know. I don't really have anything that I could point to historically to say if they did or didn't. But this does note that yeah, with Loki's many implied connections to fire, he might have been a natural ally of blacksmiths, and if he's also connected to Thor, thunder and lightning, maybe that also kind of backs up my own personal argument that like maybe Thor was an ally of blacksmiths too, since they were buddies. I don't know. That's just me. But it does go on to talk about an archaeological find discovered on a beach in Denmark. There was a stone tube or pipe found through which air is blown into a forge. And I've seen this used nowadays, and something I might get my hands on is just like a metal pipe that you can use to direct your breath when you're trying to stoke a fire and like get a fire to ignite. You can more direct where you're getting the airflow into the base of the fire, which is cool, like even when it's in a fire pit. But yeah, they had these things back in the day. This one was carved of stone, and it was used to blow air into the forge in order to get it hot enough to melt metals while also shielding the bellows. And it says this soapstone bellows guard has been connected to Loki because there's an image of a mustached face carved into it with a series of gashes across the mouth that might be interpreted as Loki's sewn lips, because in that story eventually he loses a bet, and instead of allowing the dwarves to take his head, he argues that like, well, he still has ownership of his neck, so they can't take anything above the neck. And so as a result, they just sew his lips shut because they're tired of all of his talk. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that perhaps there is this archaeological find that might connect him to blacksmithing and being a god of fire and creation of fire. I know one of my UPGs is that I definitely like not only associate him with Prometheus, and like, while he's not, I did say this in my video, while he's not Satan, I do view Loki as a Luciferian figure as far as a light bringer and a bringer of innovation and like kindler of creative sparks in that way and things like that. And also kind of a rebellious figure, because Lucifer rebelled against God, and Loki does kind of go against the gods and what they want sometimes. But yeah, not just that, but so yeah, he is kind of tied to like a fire god in those ways. And then yeah, it was interesting, as I said, that when we in the Loki ritual that we're planning, we might invoke some of those more primordial aspects of the god, because as far as like Loki's connection to possible connections to fire, and me viewing him as like not only Ve as the sacred enclosure, but the sacred fire, as far as you could view a fire being born from lightning striking a tree, being a fire of divine origin. It wasn't made by human hands. It's, much like, the mistletoe was viewed as sacred by the Druids as a plant that had like never touched the ground or been profaned in that way. Maybe that fire up in the tree is a divine or holy fire because it's never touched the ground and things like that. But what else does it say? Mm-hmm. Go through more of my little highlights here. Ooh, okay, here's a good one leading up to my little argument. It also talks about like the theme of sacrifice being a big one with Loki, like, definitely law of equivalent exchange with a lot of these gods, like you have to give in order to receive. Yeah, Jotuns as bringers of change and not just chaos. I think for me, the Jotuns, I view them more as like they're these primordial beings of like nature and maybe the more like destructive forces of nature, where it's not so much that they're malicious or like vindictive or anything like that, but just that. Whereas like I would say in terms of like closeness with feeling a closeness to and beneficence toward humanity, it would go Vanir, Aesir, and then like Jotun are like all the way out here, way outside the Venn diagram. Whereas like they're not really like malicious or evil per se, but yeah, they're just kind of these all-powerful ancient beings. Some seem to even be older than the gods, and they're just not really concerned with humanity. Like they might be willing to hear us out or work with us, but overall, like they kind of could care less what we're doing. And if like as a personification of these like more wild, destructive forces of nature, that like they're just gonna kind of trample over everything in their path regardless. They don't care. It's not so much that they don't care. They're just like, we don't even register on their radar. We're not even a blip on their radar, It's not even that they don't care. They just don't even see us. That kind of thing. That's just kind of my view and my experience so far. Some of them might be a little bit more closer to elements of Midgard and like closer to humanity and closer to just being like more anthropomorphized, however you want to call it. And more willing to work with us. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience so far. It talks about how to make a Lokian amulet, a Lokian sculpture, all these different things that you could do, making Lokian prayer beads, which I thought was cool. So it's not just like going into UPGs and historical knowledge of Loki, but also like giving you things to go off of. Yeah, how often do we think about ants? Only when they bite us or crawl on our food. And that's very much giant, like Jotun vibes, like fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, like they only noticed you and only noticed really like even the gods or some of the heroes. I just did that whole video about like Svipdag's journey to Jotunheim, where it's like, they don't even notice us until we go there and try to like talk to them or steal their shit. Yeah, very that. So it goes into more of like Loki's connections to fire, his connections to sacrifice. Of like sometimes you have to give something up, and especially something valuable, destroy it or otherwise remove it in order to replace it with something better. And then it talks about. Oh, I thought this was cool. It talks about, and this was something I also just learned in the Wisdom of Odin Discord from someone there, that the star Sirius, the dog star, is in Norse myths called Lokabrunna, which means Loki's torch, which I thought was cool. And that the name Sirius also comes from the Greek words serios, meaning scorching. another tied to fire. And then this furthermore says that Lokabrunna is a bright star which can be located by using Orion's belt as an arrow that points downward and to the left. The first brightest star you see in that direction is Loki's torch. Actually, it's the brightest star in the night sky. So I thought that was cool, not only just because I love astronomy and astrology, like I love stargazing, and not only that, but I've always had this personal connection to the constellation of Orion, just because, like, as a kid, you know, you would take trips to the planetarium and learn about constellations and stuff. But when you're actually up there looking at all those stars, how many do you actually remember and are able to pick out? If you were me, it was two, the Big Dipper and Orion. Those were the two that I could always remember and always find. And like, especially like going on long car trips at night, there was just something kind of comforting to me about being able to look up and find Orion in the sky. I just always liked that constellation. I liked being able to always like find little stars that form his belt. And so I think that's cool. Yeah, like I love when it's the time of year that Orion finally appears back in the sky. It was really cool. I want to say that when my first gathering at Ostara, we did a prayer ritual there, and like Orion was like right over in the sky, and it was just so cool. But yeah, I love when I get to see him in the sky, and so I thought that was cool that he's also kind of connected to this Lokabrunna, and that Lokabrunna is also connected to Sirius. So shout out to all my fellow Harry Potter nerds out there. Sirius Loki connection. Where are my other notes? Because what I really wanted to talk about before this video gets too long over the hour mark is more of that like Loki as the sacred fire aspect. Yeah, let me see here. Where is it? Talks about the binding of Loki. Sorry, I know this is like really boring. You're just watching me like scroll through the notes on my phone. So yeah, talk amongst yourselves. Did you read Pagan Portals Loki? What did you think of it? I'll give you a topic. Is Loki a Jotun? Is Loki counted among the Aesir? Is he neither? Is he both? Where do you think he deserves to fall? Discuss. Let's see. Okay, so it goes into more of what I was talking about in the very beginning of this live stream, because yes, coffee talk. I'm glad I'm not the only one like showing my age here by referencing a super, super old Michael Myers SNL skit. but yes. One of the first notes that I had was talking about like Sigyn and her being tied to possibly Sig, meaning like a victory goddess. And it says that her Sigyn has been translated to mean something just like victorious girlfriend, which is an unusual name for a deity, especially wife of a god that was not victorious, according to the stories. You know, he's bound. But the author notes that there's a similarity between Loki and Sigyn's relationship and that of the Vedic gods Agni and Svaha, where Agni is perhaps the oldest god in Vedic cosmology, like one of the oldest gods, because Agni is the god of fire, and not just that, the sacred fire, the ritual fire. Hello. Oh, I have like 4 people here now. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Read the book topic, and I really appreciated the information and ideas for connecting with Loki. Yeah, me too. That's definitely one thing that first drew me to wanting to pick up this book and read it, was someone that, is a follower of Loki, is wanting to work more with him, and I like that it goes into the author's own personal gnosis. Speaking of Lokis, yeah, hi. Speaking of Loki, if you want to come up here and be on the video chat, we're talking about you. Yeah, hi, here's Loki. Make his appearance in every video. Sometimes I think that's how God Loki gets his tribute and gets his share of the attention, is by sending his little minion cat Loki to appear in every single video. The frickin' candle broke down the middle and spilled back. Yeah, that was one thing I was going to mention, and then I think I got off topic, was that my own personal experience with Loki is being associated with fire, is that not only is he that like Lucifer, Lightbringer, Prometheus figure where he can bring fire to humanity, he also likes to mess with me by taking away my fire making abilities. Like if I have matches, like all the matches will break, or if I'm trying to start a fire, the wind will keep blowing it out, or I can't light my lighter, or I have 5 lighters, and the other week I had like 5 lighters in the house and they were all dead, and I had kept forgetting to go out and buy more. And I somehow managed before I left for work that day to where there was one night where like I kept losing my lighter everywhere, even though it was like right next to me on the couch. And then the next day, yeah, like all my lighters were dead. I hadn't been able to go out and buy more yet, and I was leaving for work, and right there, like next to my keys, brand new lighter appeared out of nowhere. So I was like, thanks, Loki. So I definitely associate him not only like with fire, but like specifically likes to mess with you and prank you with your fire making abilities. Yeah, I'm talking about stuff. Loki is very talkative. Yeah. He really likes to be part of conversations. If I'm like on the phone talking, or like in here talking to the camera, he really needs to like come in and talk and like be part of the conversation. And if you do not include him, much like God Loki, he will demand to be included. He will get bitey. Cute, but bitey. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Here's my cat Loki. Ironically enough, I adopted him like a full year before becoming Norse pagan, before Norse paganism was even a blip on my radar or a thing I knew existed. I was like, oh, I like Marvel. Loki, yeah, Loki's a trickster god of mischief. That's a good name for a cat. Cats are like rambunctious and mischievous. Little did I know the energy that I was inviting down upon myself and into my home, because yes, this cat over here is the literal minion embodiment of Loki. I did not know how much Loki energy this cat was going to channel when I named him. Okay, but yeah, as I was saying, Loki and the ritual fire. So it goes into Agni, which is the Vedic god of fire, and not only that, as I said, one of the oldest gods. Because it's only through the vehicle of Agni as the sacred fire that all of the other gods are able to receive their offerings. Everything goes into the fire. Food, drinks, whatever it is. And like often, like as we often do in our ritual gatherings, we'll all gather around the fire, have a big bonfire, and one by one, all go up and offer our offerings into it. And I think that can definitely perhaps speak to not only like the fire being the means that conveys the material goods, transforms them into the spiritual, into that smoke, and then carries them up heavenward so that they can be received by the celestial. So he's a transformative being in that way as fire transforms. Marvel is a gateway drug, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not a comic book nerd. I watched Marvel movies because I had a friend who was, but like Thor was always my favorite Marvel movie. I think just because like it's directed by Kenneth Branagh, who did all this Shakespeare stuff, so he kind of just brought that air of class and elevation to a comic book superhero movie, and I think that's why it's so good. And I will fight you on this. Yeah, I love Thor. And then, yeah, it kind of made me remember how much I always did really like the Norse myths and branch off from there. But yeah, as far as like not only Agni being this ritual fire and this sacred fire through which all of their offerings are received, Loki is also kind of the gift bringer and messenger of the gods. And so it says, in this context, the image of a woman holding a bowl, almost like an offering bowl, over her husband, a fire deity, to keep liquid from dripping on him, takes on a very different tone. So I just thought that was cool that it might equate Loki with a fire underneath the kettle or basin. And it also made me start thinking of Loki as Calcifer, the fire demon from Howl's Moving Castle. That's like one of my favorite movies. I love Ghibli movies, but yeah, Loki, just think about that. Think about Loki as Calcifer, the fire demon, and really you're not far off, especially in terms of like attitude and sense of humor. But yeah, like feeding things to the fire, feeding offerings to the fire. Yeah, I think like as a god of fire, Loki especially loves burnt offerings. But I think it's interesting to think about him as a god of this sacred fire, and perhaps also speaks to him having that connection with Odin and that pact with Odin, where like Odin said he would never receive a drink without Loki also receiving a drink. And it's also said that Odin only drinks. He doesn't even need food. He subsists only on liquid offerings. So for him to never receive an offering or a drink without Loki also receiving one, perhaps speaks to Loki and being embodied by the ritual fire that all the offerings are put into. He always gets to drink with Odin. He always gets an offering when Odin does, by being that fire, by being the means by which all of those offerings are received and consumed by the other gods. So just food for thought. Oh man, I'm totally gonna have to go watch Howl's Moving Castle now after I get off of here, you guys. I love it. Ah, so many cat furs sticking to my lipstick. But yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think about that theory, because yeah, I had seen the argument kind of put forth of like, I can't find anywhere in the Eddas or Snorri's text or the sagas specifically associating or equating Loki himself with fire. So I think this book does a really good job of probing and delving deeper into the stories and using some comparative mythology and personal gnosis to make a really good and really powerful, compelling argument for why Loki is often associated with fire and those elements and symbols of fire. And also, yeah, it just makes a good argument for why, like, even regardless of comparative mythologies, like Loki himself could be associated with fire. I don't think it's that much of an argument or that much of a stretch. Just yeah. What else? Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite things to do, and something I want to explore more in depth. And as I start making more videos, is not only comparative mythology, but as someone who kind of did briefly study Hinduism and found a lot that appealed to me there, with the cosmology and just the system, the whole outlook, the whole spirituality as a whole. Yeah, in Marvel, Loki is a frost giant, or like part frost giant. I believe in the actual Norse text, we know is that his father is a Jotun. It doesn't specify what type. There are other stories where it specifies Jotuns as frost giants or fire giants, like the giants like Surtur down in Muspelheim. And then I think we also have like mountain giants and mountain trolls mentioned elsewhere, but it's not really specified what type or flavor of giant Loki's father was. I think also in this book, it does. I want to say it does theorize that perhaps Loki is father was a fire giant, just with him, yeah, being also associated with fire, being perhaps lightning striking a tree and creating fire. And then I believe it's actually in Svipdagsmal, the story I just went over in my video on my favorite poem in the Poetic Edda, where it does actually allude to the sword, Levitin, the wounding wand, which it says Loki forged with runes and keeps in a chest down in hell, guarded by Sinmara, which might be a fire giant, and Surtur's wife. So that might be a connection and speak to perhaps relations with fire giants too, and make an argument for him perhaps being related to fire giants. And then I think they also kind of made that connection with like him being having seeming close ties to the Svartalfs and relationship with Svartalfs and working with them in the stories. Maybe that also speaks to him being a fire god and related to fire gods. Yeah, I think fire fits Loki a lot better than frost. But, I will say, and I kind of talked about it in my video where I reviewed the Loki TV show, where while I don't get like a lot of the mythological aspects 100% accurate when it comes to Loki, I think they get a lot of the characterizations of Loki dead on as far as like his motivations and character analysis is in terms of like why he does the things he does. And how it might speak to that sense of like resentment, bitterness, and not belonging. Like if his dad was a Jotun and his mom is a frost giant and he goes by the name Loki Laufeyson, he goes by his mother's name because she's the god, she's the highest ranking one. And so if he's like a bastard, and not only that, but like if we're going off of patriarchy or patrilineal, where that's the father's bloodline that counts the most. My theory is that leads into why Loki might be bitter and resentful, especially toward the Aesir, and kind of like taunt them a lot and fuck with them a lot, is that he does kind of have this deep-seated sense of never belonging, never being good enough to be one of them, like he always is going to have that element of other to him that keeps him from being able to be fully counted amongst the ranks of the Aesir, despite the fact that technically Odin's half Jotun too, but he gets to be all father, and like what do I get to be nothing. I could kind of seeing that being what leads to some of his resentment and some of his actions. So yeah, I think the Loki show kind of does a good job of delving into that and maybe touching on that as far as like motivation is concerned and characterization of Loki and personality. But that's just from me and my own experiences with him. So yeah, check that video out if you want to hear more about that. Yeah, here it goes. It talks about in Fjolvin's Maw, which I talked about in my video, Loki forged a sword called Levitin, the wounding wand or wand of destruction, the realm of his daughter. Surtur's wife, Sinmara, keeps it in an iron box, locked with 9 locks, until he will use it at Ragnarok. So yeah, it does mention that this woman keeping guard over this sword of Loki's is supposedly Surtur's wife, which might be another connection to fire giants there. And then, yeah, like I said, just fire in terms of fire being destructive, and Loki's a god of destruction. Yeah, why did you take me in if you're not going to treat me as an equal? I think there's definitely some of that to it, like he has the same bloodline as Odin. He arguably does just as many cool things as Odin. He might have had to cut off Sif's hair to get there, but you guys got some really cool presents as a result. Like, what do you want from me? Come on. But yeah, I really liked this argument, because this is one of my arguments too, is that especially the argument that a lot of modern day heathens might make, especially when you are first getting into things and all you've read is Snorri's version, and you're like, yeah, Loki, he's bad, he causes Ragnarok, he brings about the end of the world. Why would you want to work with him? Why would you invite that? It could be, I could see why people might view it as like that stereotypical movie villain, or just like chaotic villain, where they just want to watch the world burn, or they're calling on this god of destruction, failing to realize that you're calling on this god of destruction, you're not going to be the exception to the rule, you will also be destroyed when he gets here. Yeah, Loki was pretty powerful considering he has powers that didn't require magic objects. Odin and Loki are both able to shapeshift. I do find it interesting that Loki needs to borrow Freya's falcon cloak in order to like fly or turn into a bird. But yeah, he does a lot of stuff just all on his own. My personal theory is that much like Odin learned magic from Freya and learned like satyr and things from her, my personal theory is that Loki learned a lot of his tricks and like especially like magic stuff from Angrboda, because she was also a witch and among one of the first witches. So I think he learned a lot from her, but that's my own personal gnosis, own personal theory. Yeah, Odin's half giant too. If we really want to get into the semantics, they, like I said, they have the same bloodline, but for some reason Odin got to argue his way into divine right of parentage, and Loki just kind of just stuck being his left hand man behind the scenes. Because it does go on to say and make the point that it has been observed that some people might make the argument like, yeah, Loki killed Balder and he brings about Ragnarok. He's bad. Why would you want to work with him? But it has been observed, as it notes in this book, by some heathens that because Balder was killed, he will now be preserved in hell and avoid the carnage of Ragnarok. Because of this, after he is able to step into his role as the new leader of the gods and create the new and better world, reborn from the ashes. So not only is the theme of death and resurrection and that things are cyclical, like just a huge theme in Norse cosmology as a whole, Loki's actions create an underworld safe haven for Balder. And so, yeah, like I kind of wonder if Odin and Loki kind of had the Balder thing planned between the two of them behind the scenes. So, because like Loki's the initiator who takes Balder out of his place of safety, which he does for a lot of us. Like I said, if there's one thing that Loki could not abide, it was for the gods to just be sitting back and resting on their laurels. He does not like stagnation, and yeah, even for the gods, like the gods are not immune from it. The gods, it was almost like too much for them to. Because the gods, the interesting thing about the Norse gods is that they might be immortal because of the apples of immortality, but they're not invincible. They can be killed. And so for there to be one of them that was not able to be killed, it's kind of like that nature abhors a vacuum thing. Like if there's one thing I think nature abhors, it's stagnation and not letting things grow and evolve. So yeah, I kind of wonder if, especially like knowing Odin, and like I said, with him and Loki being two sides of the same coin and working together a lot, I think Odin was playing some 4D chess behind the scenes. He saw a lot of things, a lot of threads of fate from up on his high seat. He kind of went to great lengths to figure out what needed to be done to preserve the world from Ragnarok. And if he knew that one of those things might have to be the death of Balder and giving Balder this safe place to hide out, like a bunker, until the whole thing blows over, maybe they were playing some 4D chess and had the whole thing planned the whole time. But yeah, I would not want to be the one to break that news to Frigg, would you? I could see why Odin would want to keep that on the down low. Yeah, if Loki doesn't do what he's supposed to do, we don't have the cyclical recreation of the world, the great cleansing. And like I said in my Loki video, I think the deity that I most strongly associated with him with, like not just Tezcatlipoca and Agni, the one I most strongly associate him with is Shiva, the Destroyer. Because I have a whole theory that, like, if we're going on like Vedic tripartite system where we have Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, creator, preserver, destroyer. We have Odin as creator, and then Thor as the preserver, and Loki as the destroyer. It's all part of the cycle. You can't have one without the other. You can't have order without chaos. You can't have life without the void. You can't have life without death. You can't have one without the other. You got to have Loki, or life would be boring. And yeah, like I said, definitely with that cleansing fire, sometimes you have to make way for the old, the outdated, in order to pave way for the new. But yeah, I think that's about all I really had to touch on as far as things from the book that I thought were interesting and of note. The last couple of chapters do just kind of go into like what to do if you do want to become a Lokian and start actually working with Loki, in terms of like offering rituals, hearth or fire rituals you could do. Making a Loki candle, Loki amulets, making an oath, like offering yourself to Loki, or pledging an oath to him as like your patron, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I do like that the book isn't afraid to go there and give you details. Like I said, even though like I'm not one to just like dabble in blood magic, especially where Loki is concerned, like the author's not afraid to go there and give you those instructions. I don't think all of that kind of stuff should just be like totally taboo, off limits in the restricted section. Like, we have to be able to learn whether or not you want to take it and incorporate it into your practice. It's nice and important to have the information available and out there. So, and that's kind of my takeaway from the whole thing. Whether or not you yourself actually want to work with Loki, and honestly, like even as someone that does have a more open-minded view of him and a kind of a soft spot for him, and was able to relate to him and see aspects of myself in him, whether I like it or not. I don't blame anyone who is wary of working with Loki or wants nothing to do with him. Like, I don't blame you if you don't want to invite that kind of chaos into your life. Because, like I said, when you came around me, I was like, what do you want with me, bro? Yeah, it's a really nice book. It's pretty short. The author does a really good job of not only touching on the where we see Loki featured in the stories, but going further into them and giving some fun, cool theories as to what they might say about Loki as a whole. Because, yeah, we don't really have a lot of historical evidence pointing to historical worship of Loki. But I think, like I said, since you can't really have order without chaos, I could, like, why do I have so many cat hairs on my face still? One of my own personal connections that I've made with Loki as a god of order versus chaos, I also see him as a god of chance. And what's the word for it? It starts with a P. Like a god of chance, a god of luck, a god of why can't I think of the word? It starts with a P. Or like possibilities. I don't know. But yeah, he's like not just a god of like order versus chaos. But personally, like, I will call on him and ask him to intervene to like prevent chaos, or at least like keep it from being like totally bad and fucking with me too much. Like, I'm not gonna lie, one of the reasons I first started actually offering to Loki was almost like paying off the mob. Like, what do I have to give you to get you off my back, to get you to go away and leave me alone and just like fuck with me a little bit less, Like, I will definitely have those days where, like, when I said like I don't blame people for not wanting to work with him, like I will definitely have those days where I'm like just not in the mood, and he will like come around and I'm just like, bro, could you not right now, because I cannot deal with it. I can't even. Yeah, like I will have days where I'm just like, I can't deal with you right now, bro, not now. My recommendation for that, if you are someone who feels like you're getting messed with and like it might be Loki and you're not ready to dive into that, you don't want to work with him, you're not comfortable with it yet, call on Thor. According to the stories, he was the only one that Loki ever seemed to be afraid of, because as soon as Thor showed up to the party, Loki would make himself scarce. So if you need to get Loki off your back, or you chase him out, or he's just coming on too strong and you need to kind of keep him back in line, definitely call on Thor. like I said, I kind of call on Odin and Loki together to kind of like balance the scales and help kind of maintain a balance between order and chaos, especially in these crazy times that we're living in. That was definitely a big part of like what brought me to magic in the first place, especially in 2020. Like I was doing a lot of calling on both Odin and Loki to maintain a balance between the two. So that's kind of how I see them. And in terms of Loki being like not just a god of order and chaos, I view him as like a god of luck. So I call on him to not only be nice and not cause chaos, but yeah, also a god of like maybe good luck. Like if it's like a coin toss and could be heads or tails, you know, because I do see a lot of the things he does with people sometimes towing that line of they could either go really good or really bad, you know, like those like freak accidents, those like chances of fate, where it's almost like Final Destination level type shit, where I don't think he gets to like quite those extremes of like near death experiences, but definitely like, oh, if you had walked by that ladder 1 second later, it would have toppled over and fallen on you, or you know, just little like near misses like that. Or the time when I was like eating a bag of tortilla chips and a chip like broke in my mouth and a shard of chip flew up and hit me in the eye. Like, come on. What are the chances of that? What are the chances that a chip would break in just the right way that a shard of tortilla chip would fly into my eyeball? Like, you know, just little things like that where he'll just kind of tweak the way things could go. And so yeah, yeah, Loki might have been a really early god. I think definitely a lot about what we may have known about Loki has been lost to time, especially, like I said, with him, the stories only being copied down much later under a Christianized lens and a more dualistic way of thinking. I think, yeah, a lot of what we know about Loki has either been lost or severely corrupted. So yeah, Jackson Crawford actually has a really great video, which I recommend you watch, where it talks about some of the possible meanings of Loki's name and his theory that one of the meanings of Loki's name might also mean like loved, like lofter as loved or beloved, kind of like, oh, everybody loves Raymond, or like, yeah, he who shall not be named type of thing, where like, oh, if you like I said, Beetlejuice, where if you call on him too many times, you might get his attention and he'll come fuck with you. So it's like, maybe if we come up with this cutesy nickname for him and be like, oh yeah, it's everyone's favorite Loki, beloved Loki, everyone's favorite guy. Maybe if we call him by this little name, it'll kind of like take away some of the fear of him. So that might speak to like ways in which he was looked upon as either like, yeah, not just a god of chaos, but yeah, also a god that can bring good luck. One of my favorite things to do right now is if that whole thing of like a lucky penny, where if you find a penny on the ground, find a penny, pick it up all day long, you'll have good luck. But the thing that I always heard growing up was only if it's heads up. If you pick it up and it's tails, it supposedly won't do anything for you. I don't know. But either way, if I find a lucky penny on the ground, one of my favorite things to do now is pick it up and give it to Loki as an offering. To be like, here's some little good luck for you. May you someday repay the kindness when I need it. So that's just kind of my own UPG. I view him as a god of luck. And praying to him for, yeah, not just like, if you could cause chaos, but maybe if I'm nice to you, you'll kind of lean more toward like letting me have some good luck. Sometimes you might get out of things by the skin of your teeth, but he'll still get you out of them, you know? So yeah, I definitely really liked a lot of what the author in this book on Loki had to say. I agree with a lot of the theories and the points that they make regarding his possible origins and symbolisms and meanings, as far as being a fire god, chaos god, all of those good things. And just, yeah, definitely being not just a controversial, enigmatic figure, but perhaps a little bit misunderstood. So give him $2 bills. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, I think Next time I go gambling, I'm giving Loki a penny. Yeah, I like that. And that's something I do for the Vanir too, almost like a wishing well. I'll toss coins into water as wishes for Vanir, as gods related to like wealth and good fortune. So yeah, I do that for Loki too. I give him lucky pennies. That's just me. That's just something I do, and one of my own little personal no-sees with Loki. If anyone else has like any personal no-sees or experiences with Loki, like I would love to hear them, because I think this is kind of would be a good way to like wrap up the discussion. I've touched on pretty much everything I wanted to go over in terms of like specifically mentioned in the books, but yeah. Something tells me Loki and gambling don't mix. Yeah, that could be one of those things where it goes either way. Like I talked about, like he'll urge you to give into your good impulses and your bad. So it kind of depends on your own fortunes, whether or not going to the casino is a good idea or a bad idea. It could go either way, especially if you're getting Loki involved. So yeah. So yeah, I definitely, like I said, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to work with him or having the views of him that they do, or even if you are more open-minded, still just, yeah, not wanting to invite that chaos into your life. But for me, I think the book does a good job of explaining and making arguments for looking a little bit deeper into that man behind the curtain. That is Loki and some of his more enigmatic and more ancient theoretical aspects. And also does a good job of, giving advice for new pagans, new people that might want to just get started with working with Loki. He does some good, just like quick, easy sample offerings and touches on things you can give. Spicy things, cinnamon flavored things I have found and have heard from other people, like cinnamon flavored candy, as part of my like whole inner child work thing. And just like as far as like offering gods things that I like, I have a big sweet tooth and I love candy. So I love sharing my candy with Loki. Sometimes he has specific requests, like the time he asked me to give him Twinkies. But who am I to question the gods? So yeah, what else have been your own personal experiences or signs, symbols, associations with Loki? What do you give him? I bought him a little thing of Fireball once. He loved it. I also associate spiders a lot with Loki because I think that was like my first sign that for me that he was coming around was I was just having spiders literally like thrown at me everywhere all of a sudden, and I am slightly arachnophobic, so it's kind of not cool. But I'm trying to develop a little bit more tolerance for them for Loki's sake, as long as they're not too big and scary looking. Sometimes they still have to be killed with fire, but that was also one thing I found was that, the one time I did kill a big spider in my basement with fire, my book on runes that I had left laying right on my table with a stack of books that I was going to read disappeared for 2 weeks. So yeah, he will fuck with you, especially when it comes to the fire and the spiders. Yeah, I don't like spiders. Ugh, cat hairs, so tickly. Yeah, no joke, Rachel. Killing spiders with blowtorches. That's what I made my husband do. And that's why my book disappeared on me for 2 weeks, because I was trying to be more tolerant of spiders for Loki, but I was downstairs in the basement because that's where we keep our like desktop gaming PCs. So I was down there on the computer. And it being the basement, I get it. There's spiders, but like this guy was big. He was like this big, and we get brown recluses up here, and I was not messing with that. Like if it's small and cute, I will now sometimes like take it outside, or like if like I have a little spider bro in a little web hang out in the corner of the kitchen, like he got to live there because he was helping out with bugs and stuff. But this one was too big, and I did make my husband come down there and use the blowtorch to kill it with fire. So maybe that was overkill. Maybe it was slightly uncalled for, but yeah. Ooh, I'm interested what things you've been hearing and seeing that you're associating with Loki, because yeah, for me it was spiders, which is not like common or I think mentioned anywhere in the Norse text specifically. So that was just kind of my first own like personal gnosis association with Loki, because I think it does kind of say in this book and other places that I've read that the name Loki, there is a cute Swedish word for that sounds like Loki, which is a name for spider in their language. And like spiders are like weavers, and Loki kind of like weaves things like a spider, like tweaking his little web behind the scene, weaving little tricky webs. Hiding in the corners, being sneaky like a spider. And Loki also in one of the stories weaves a net. That's kind of like weaving a spider web. He likes to visit dreams too. I actually have not had many or any really encounters with gods in dreams that I know about. I kind of complained about the fact that the one and only time I've ever encountered what I think was Odin in a dream, it was in a dream where I was looking for my husband because my husband's an Odin follower. So I was like, oh, sure. The first time I run into Odin, it's because I'm looking for you because I knew you'd be hanging out at Odin's house if you were anywhere. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because I am more easily able to use things like tarot and things like that to communicate with deity, that they don't need to come into my dreams, because I think sometimes people are like more open in their subconscious when they're dreaming, and just kind of gods and things have easier access to us when we're asleep. So maybe they just don't need to get to me by that method because they're able to get to me other ways. Yeah, the meme where sleep in your head spider legs, I don't like it. I'm not a fan of that. That's some nightmare fuel right there. But so yeah, spiders for me are definitely a big personal one. The fire making ability, and specifically pranks and messing with me regarding fire making ability with like matches, lighters, candles. One of my favorite things to do on my Odin Loki altar, I have 2 candles, and I've kind of split it halfway down the middle, where the left side is Loki's and the right side is Odin's. So when I go and do stuff, I'll light their 2 candles. And it's really fun for me to just watch the flames and the way that the flames themselves look and move and interact. Like, it's very interesting because I have noted that when I'm doing something for the both of them, they'll both be pretty even. The other day, I was doing something more specifically for Loki. And I still lit both candles because I want to be respectful of Odin. I'll always still, offer him a drink and stuff, and some incense. Even if I'm kind of more specifically asking to work with one or the other, I still give to both. But yeah, I was more specifically seeking out Loki this time, so I had lit both candles. And the Odin candle, the flame was like teeny tiny, this big, like pretty small, not really doing a whole lot. I was almost afraid it was going to go out. And meanwhile, the Loki flame is over here like an inch tall, just popping off, going crazy. And so it's just really fun to especially see, how he manipulates the fire and just watch it kind of like talk and communicate that way. Bye, Lena. Thanks for joining. So yeah, have you guys ever had your own personal experiences or signs from Loki? Him and Freya, I've noticed a lot like to kind of get in touch with me and communicate through radio songs. I'll just be driving, like, because I don't really listen to music a lot. Pretty much the only time I have music on is when I'm driving in the car. But yeah, I think they'll just kind of like have a song on the radio where I'll be listening to the lyrics, and it will specifically just like remind me of Loki. And just kind of that thing where it just kind of makes me like smile and laugh to myself while I'm driving in my car, and just kind of brightens up my day a little bit. I think he likes to kind of make me like laugh and cheer me up with things like that. But yeah, that's about all I really have to say in terms of notes that I had made on actual Loki, my own personal experiences, thoughts, feelings with Loki. We're kind of going on like 2 hours now, and I wanted to keep this to an hour, but for a short book, like this book was only like 80 or 90 pages, like I said, but for a short book, I really found I was highlighting like all over the place going through this thing, because they make a lot of really good points, observations, and commentaries on this kind of enigmatic, elusive, controversial figure in Norse mythology. A lot of people are very polarized and divided on their views of him, how they see him. But yeah, for me personally, I think he's definitely not evil or malicious per se. Definitely more just chaotic neutral. on the alignment scale. So at least in my own personal experiences with him. So I definitely can say at this point that I am somewhat proud to call myself a chaos kid. And I hope that as I kind of spend more time in this faith, and that as I start to see more and more people coming into this whole Norse pagan thing and learning and researching more about these gods, that we will start to see some of these more open-minded modern takes on the Norse gods and Norse paganism, as far as kind of getting away from just the Eddas and just Snorri's word on things, and seeing, because one of the things that I love most since joining this faith and this community is comparing our own personal experiences. I love things like this where we get to talk about our own personal experiences with the gods and kind of compare notes. And I love seeing where things match up, because it's so validating, especially for something as like this, where like there aren't a lot of people who at least are like willing to say that they work with Loki and are friends with Loki and have like a more friendly view of him. Yeah, that can kind of be hard to find other like-minded pagans out there, even within what you would think is an open-minded community. So I love getting to compare notes on experiences with all of the gods, and just compare notes and see, especially with like in this book, where things match up with my own personal experiences, my own personal theories. It's just so validating and supporting to know that you're not alone out there, and that other people are having the same things, making the same connections, and just kind of emphasize and further solidify in my mind that it's real, that the gods are real. It's not all in my head. It's not all my imagination. Other people are saying the same things, you know? And eventually, as it goes on, some of these UPGs start to become more VPGs, or verified personal gnosis, where so many people have had things in common and common experiences that we can kind of start to say like more clearly, like, yes, this is an association that you can have with this god. We've all had it. So that's just really cool for me. I'm really glad that you guys have been joining me for these live streams and these book discussions. They're a really fun way for me to get to kind of talk about my takeaways from all the stuff that I've been reading and digesting lately, and get other people's takes and opinions on it. So thank you so much for joining me here. I hope it was a good conversation. I try to keep an eye on a little chat over here instead of just rambling and going off topic as I want to do. So thanks for bearing with me if I got a little all over the place while scrolling through the books and everything. But yeah, I really hope to see you guys next month. I'm gonna announce here soon what the book club book for March will be, and then we'll have all of March to read it before we come back here again at the beginning of next month and discuss it. So I really look forward to that with you all. These have definitely been really fun for me. So I don't get out a lot. I don't talk to a lot of people. I'm kind of an introvert, so this is fun for me. I like getting to get online and talk with you people about this kind of stuff, because I'm into this shit. So I'm glad you guys are too. Let me know later on in the comments if you missed the chat, if you read this book, and if you did, what you thought about Pagan Portals Loki by Dagolf Loptson, part of the Pagan Portals series of books. And yeah, I really look forward to finding some other books in this Pagan Portal series to possibly read and talk about with you guys. If there are any other Norse gods specifically that you want to read the book on and talk about next, let me know. And until then, stay classy, pagans. Bye. Bye.